As a young person, it's sometimes hard to navigate the apocalyptic landscape that is teen angst, especially if you're also queer. Growing up, I have always found solace in the stories of other misfits, stories of people who went against societal norms and who just stood out for being different. When I was a 6-year-old, I dreamed of Peter Pan taking me away to an island where I could be myself, where I could belong. I was hoping my wardrobe would magically turn into a portal to Narnia, where I could be a brave knight and learn how to sword fight. As I got older, I slowly learned that using stories as a form of escapism wasn't enough anymore. The real world started to catch up, and my childhood dreams of fitting in somewhere slowly began turning into a real life nightmare. I got bullied for standing out, for being different. I didn't have any real friends until I was 14, and sometimes I still feel like running away from reality for a second. Just like Peter Pan, I had to realize that kids can't stay kids forever. They have to grow up, become teenagers. A big thing that comes along with that, especially when you get stamped as this outsider, is a sense of alienation. And whenever I get confronted with that childhood feeling again, I turn to stories of other queer people and queer filmmakers. These stories became a way for me to start embracing myself and my identity, and I owe a big thank you for that realization to Gregg Araki. Because 15 years later, I found that safe space I longed for as a kid and a teenager in his films, especially the ones in his teen apocalypse trilogy. I watched the 3 installments of this trilogy back to back one October evening after I got home from my very first therapy appointment, and it gave me the sanctuary I was in dire need of. I had only seen another one of his films before, which was 2 years ago, and it was a 2004 Mysterious Skin, which left such a big imprint on me. It's one of my favorites, but I will get into that film another time. But other than that, I hadn't taken the time to properly sit down and enjoy his other work until now. When it comes to film and music, I mostly let myself be led by my emotions. I believe certain things will come onto my path when I need them, and when they do, I let myself be submerged completely. So without further ado, bonjour. My name is Jense, and welcome to a brand new episode of Coffee and Film. Feel free to grab a damn fine cup or two and let yourself be submerged in Gregg Araki's teen apocalypse trilogy.
None of my films are autobiographical per se. My films are all like very personal, and they're very much sort of about like my life and my world and people I know. My friends and I, when we hang out, I'm always constantly sort of taking notes, and like if somebody says something funny, I'll write it down, and eventually we'll get into one of my scripts. So my films do very much come from my world.
Gregg Araki is a Japanese-American filmmaker who first emerged onto the scene in the late 1980s. Known for his DIY mindset, punk sensibility, and pop culture references, he started making movies on a shoestring budget, making his directorial debut in 1987 with the film 3 Bewildered People in the Night. 2 years later, Araki shot The Long Weekend of Despair, a black and white film following the escapades of 3 couples, again on a small budget consisting of $5,000. His third film, however, saw an increase in budget and really put him on the map. I'm talking about the 1992 taboo-filled gay road movie The Living End. The film is regarded as an early entry in the new queer cinema movement and was nominated for a Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival that same year. From there, the next 3 works in Araki's filmography would cement his status as the father or mother of new queer cinema and our topic of today's episode, the Teen Apocalypse Trilogy. Because when you're a teenager, every day feels like the apocalypse. With recurring themes such as longing, alienation, and rebellion, characterized by his boldly stylized cinematography, deeply rooted in the queer underground scene of LA, the trilogy caused Araki to achieve a cult following, a reputation he still holds to this day. He continues to make bold and provocative and unapologetically queer work, such as the critically acclaimed 2010 film Kaboom, and his most recent, the 2019 television series Now Apocalypse. Araki truly is a pioneer for the new queer cinema genre. Every single one of his works remains provocative even to this day, and although he has had a major influence over the last 30 years or so, his films have proven difficult to screen. However, luckily for the queers and cinephiles alike, the trilogy got a newfound popularity after the second and third installment, The Doom Generation and Nowhere, got 4K restorations last year, overseen by Mother himself, finally returning to the big screen, looking and sounding better than ever. At the time, Araki wasn't aware these three films we're talking about today would become a trilogy. The first installment, titled Totally Fucked Up, was made on its own, being an homage to Godard's film Masculin Féminin. He has stated that the experience of doing that movie inspired him to do a trilogy. He wrote parts in the second and third films for the actor James Duval, who played a central part in Totally Fucked Up, thus giving birth to the trilogy. In Araki's own words, his films are for the outsiders and the weirdos, the punks and the queers. They're for people that don't really fit in, which is why they have resonated all these years. And it is with the biggest smile on my face that I welcome today's guest of Coffee and Film, Gregg Araki's so-called muse. He's one of my favorite actors, one of the sweetest people I have ever met, and on top of that, he has the most beautiful brown eyes, the one and only Mr. James Duval.
Oh, there we go.
Oh
Hello.
my God, hi.
How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
It's like a dream come true for you to do this.
I'm very flattered.
But like, thank you for keeping up with my emails for 7 months.
Of course. Well, thank you. I'm
Like
sorry.
my DMs
It's
and
just been a crazy 7 months.
It has been. But you know what? It has given me something to look forward to. So, it was like a blessing in disguise. I hope you're doing well.
I am. I was working and traveling, and I'm looking for a new place to move at the moment. So I'm still a little busy, but things are good, and then they're going to pick up in the fall.
Oh, that's lovely. Do you have any movie plans that you can feel?
There's a couple movies that I'm hoping to be filming in the fall time. They're raising money right now. I don't know what I can say about them, but they're kind of cool little indie kind of horror movies. One is being put together by Joseph Polquin from Five Nights at Freddy's, and really an incredibly talented actor and musician and skateboarder. And I met him on this movie we did earlier this year called Skate to Hell. It's like a comedy horror skate movie.
It sounds intriguing.
It was fun.
Yeah. My best friend is really into horror movies. I like him too, but I never watch him alone. So whenever we hang out or like have a sleepover, they always show me horror movies. The gorier the better is their motto. So they also showed me CLC Punk the other month, and I was like, you know who that is? That's my man Jimmy, because they've never seen any of your movies, I think. So our worlds have finally.
I hope they liked SLC Punk. That was a fun movie. I'm very proud of that
Such a
movie.
good film. But we're here to talk about other really good movies.
Of course.
But before we do that, I would love to know, since the podcast is called Coffee and Film, do you like coffee? And how do you drink your coffee?
I'm drinking coffee right now.
Yes.
Well, let's see if we can get it right. So right now I put a little cream in it. I used to drink it black, but I started putting a little cream so it doesn't stain my teeth yellow, because I like to drink a lot of coffee, 3-4 cups a day.
How did it all start for you? Because the trilogy, your breakthrough, wasn't it?
That was my very first, the Totally Effed Up was my very first movie. And I had moved to Hollywood maybe 6 months before that movie. Moved in with a friend I was living in on his couch, and I was job hunting, so I was looking for a job every day. And there was this cafe that I always used to get coffee at. I'd go record shopping and I'd get coffee after I was done record shopping. And I always see this kid that wasn't a kid. It was Greg in this cafe. And I thought, wow, this is great. Every time I'm out looking for a job. He's here doing his homework. I wish I had home. It's like I should be as dedicated as him. And one day he just walked up to me and said, are you an actor? Because I make these little movies. And it turned out to be Gregg, who was 10 years older than me. He just looked like a kid like me, and asked me to audition for Totally Effed Up, and sent me the script.
How
And
old were you at that
I read it. 18. Yeah, I met him when I was 18. And I think it was the same for a lot of the other actors. So Gilbert Luna from Totally Effed Up, who plays Steven, who films all of us, he was also 18 or 19 at the time. And I think Gregg or Andrea met him or our other producer friend Eileen met him in a coffee shop. And then he came in and auditioned for Totally Effed Up. So everybody in that movie we were all non-actors, really just kind of plucked up out of, literally coffee shops. And, we were all between 18 and 21. It was a really, really interesting time, because I think I just graduated high school. It was 1991 or 1990 into 91. And, so what brought me to Hollywood was music shopping. And that was ultimately also what Gregg and I had in common, was I realized we listened to pretty much the exact same music. And so that was an instant bond for Gregg and I as well. So we bonded over the script, we bonded over the story, bonded over the characters, we bonded over the music. And the music being such a big part of who the characters and the movies and the story were, I think is also what became a big anchor between Gregg and I and our friendship, just because we share the same love of most of the same things.
I guess you could say I'm totally fucked up. My name's Andy. My friends call me Eraserhead. Actually, I don't have any friends. That's not true either. I'm 18.
We start our odyssey through the vast landscape of teen angst with Totally Fucked Up, a 1993 drama consisting of 15 random celluloid fragments chronicling the dysfunctional lives of 6 gay and lesbian adolescents as they struggle to get along with each other and with life in the face of various major obstacles like navigating relationships, love, sex, and homophobia. Araki describes it as a love letter to the young gays and lesbians who didn't fit into the cultural stereotype of the gay community of the early 90s. Time to meet our players. First on the roster is Andy. He's my baby. He's 18 years old, doesn't believe in love. He's very depressed and very uptight about pretty much everything, especially sex. Tommy, on the other hand, calls it pure bliss, a little moment of heaven in this hell on earth. Then we have Michelle and Patricia, the lesbian couple who speak romance fluently. Our other couple are Steven and Derek, whose relationship ends abruptly once Derek finds out that Steven has been cheating on him. With its runtime of 78 minutes, Araki takes us on a journey of 15 vignettes punctuated by video interviews that are conducted by Steven, the group's budding filmmaker. By putting the story into the hands of the character of Steven, Araki makes the viewer feel as close to the group of friends as they are to each other. We experience what it's like to live a life that is very underground and invisible in the mainstream and in conventional gay media. In his own words, he desired to represent the unrepresented, and he did so in a very raw and human way, both with the way of storytelling through different parts and by providing the cinematography and editing of the film itself. Araki said they shot on 16mm film without any permits and virtually no crew. He operated the camera himself, accompanied only by a sound person, PA, and the cast themselves. Our filmmaker describes Totally Fucked Up as a kinda twisted cross between avant-garde experimental cinema and a queer John Hughes flick that explores the various serious problems confronting young queers today: AIDS, alienation, suicide, drugs, fag-bashing violence, and not having a date on a Saturday night. Araki isn't afraid to get into the nitty-gritty of queer life in this film. Totally Fucked Up is considered a seminal entry in the new queer cinema genre for the way it brutally addresses the moral panic of the AIDS crisis, youth alienation, and the high suicide rate among gay teens. The film provides a rare insight into queer life in an era of oppression and radiates the raw energy and nihilistic abandon that will become Araki's signature throughout his filmmaking career. Another thing Araki isn't afraid of is using humor to call out these systems that are trying to eradicate queer people simply for being. As a queer person born in a different era and a different continent, as a matter of fact, I think it's very important to acknowledge the people who came before me and opened doors for people from my generation that we sometimes take for granted. Totally Fucked Up serves as yet another reminder as to what life was like and how important representation was and still can be. Araki has always been truthful in his filmmaking. Truth may be difficult to swallow, but queer voices deserve to be heard in every way, shape, and form. Totally Fucked Up has quickly become one of my favorite queer films because of how these fragments come together to form a whole. It is refreshing to see a filmmaker not hide anything or adhere to societal standards or change his art to be easier on the audience. The film wasn't made to please the masses. It's something Gregg Araki was never invested in. In an interview, he recounts how Totally Fucked Up, along with The Living End, were very much a product of the ACT UP and queer nation, the late 80s, early 90s artistic political scene. He goes on to say that there was a lot of overlap between political activism, culture, art, and young artists. Both were very much a part of that time. And that's why I'm so glad they exist today, because they are kind of historical artifacts of a super important period in queer history. It's scary how relevant these stories still are 30 years later. Totally Fucked Up knows a cast of very diverse characters. There's people of color of all different sexualities, which is so important to see as an audience. There is no one way to be queer, but a lot of the struggles and experience are the same. What stands out to me is the way our characters form their own found family. We never see the biological family of any of the characters, which kind of feels like a conscious choice of Araki, because it shows that for a lot of queers, this family is out of the picture, and the only sense of family they have are other queer people. It's important, dare I say crucial, for a queer teenager to find this family. Nothing can ever compare to the joy I feel when I see people like me being represented in media, especially when I get to share it with a friend who feels exactly the same. It's like this unspoken understanding we share between each other based solely on the fact that we're both queer. So, gays on the internet, if you're listening, get into this man's filmography. Your life will forever be changed. I need some like-minded individuals who will gush about these adorable lesbians and Andy's character with me, alright? Y'all know me by now. I love projecting myself onto characters I relate to. I am but a simple human. I see someone with a nice outfit, and I am basing my entire gender identity for the next week on them, okay? The outfit this time consisting of James Duval in a leather jacket and a t-shirt that says, "I blame society." Also, you know what the real totally fucked up thing about my experience with this film was? Within the first 10 minutes or so, my video player decided to stop working, and it was kind enough to time it so perfectly that it left me staring at the still image of a gay porn for 5 minutes, when in the film itself it only took a fraction of a second. So shout out to Gregg Araki and my Wi-Fi for making this experience unforgettable. So as you might have been able to guess by now, the character that resonated most with me was Andy. As I've mentioned before, Andy has a very negative outlook on love and life in general. As his story develops, he falls in love with another guy named Ian, and spoiler alert, his story doesn't have a happy ending. Turns out our boy Ian isn't really into monogamy, which is fair, don't get me wrong, but Andy sadly gets his heart broken and commits suicide at the end of the film. I related quite a bit to Andy's character and his ending, especially looking back at my teenage years, and found myself with tears streaming down my face as the scene of his suicide unfolds before showing us a grainy close-up of Andy as he speaks to the camera saying, "I want to enjoy life while I'm young enough to appreciate it." That's what it's all about, right? The film then cuts to its final shot, the group now consisting of only 5 who are watching the video Andy had recorded. The camera slowly pans out across their faces. We don't see anyone cry or hear anyone speak. Some of them don't even look up. Steven gets up and turns the video off, ending the film as well. Credits roll as one final message appears in bold letters. A big fucking no thanks to "You all know who you are." I must imagine it was kind of easy to make the character yours.
Yeah, I identified it with it so strongly. And it was the first screenplay I read. I'd done theater, so I had done plays before that and thought I'd like to try acting, but I wasn't sure. And even after doing my first movie with Gregg, I wasn't sure if that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I just did the movie with Gregg, did the best I could, and thought, we'll see if I'm good, if I think I'm okay, then I'll continue to try. If not, then I won't. But then we had such a great time making the movie that Gregg kind of wrote the character of Jordan in Doom Generation for me. So I was definitely going to go on that adventure with Gregg. We were not done. When I was doing Totally Effed Up, Gregg was still finishing The Living End. So he had finished filming The Living End, but he was still editing it. And those were meant to be like a statement against HIV crisis and the AIDS crisis that we were going through here. And because we were all very, very scared.
Yeah.
But his experience with working with everyone, with all, like I was saying, we were all kids, 18, 19, 20, 21, when we were doing Totally Effed Up, that he was so kind of taken aback and inspired and moved by our generation. I mean, we're only 10 years younger than him, but to see that we were kind of so open sexually about those sorts of things, even though we were still living in a society that wasn't. But, so I was very lucky to find my tribe of people when I met Gregg and started making those movies. And if anything, again, it was like to bring these movies back as like a kind of a beacon for our tribe, where we can all kind of like a way to find each other. I use this word, but I really truly mean it. I think that's magic. It's like, oh, where do I find my kind of people? Where do I find my oh, there's a beacon over there. Let's just follow that light. Follow the light. They're over there. And I feel like that those movies, and that was always our hope, there would be a beacon for that, for our people.
Wish we could just ditch him someplace, Jordan. Just get rid of him. Forget he ever existed.
He's not so bad. I mean, he's sort of like us. Lost. Like he doesn't fit in.
He scares me, Jordan. Like, I don't know what it is. There's something evil about him.
Don't be a cornet.
2 years after Totally Fucked Up, Gregg Araki takes us on a highly stylized and vibrant road trip through hell in the Doom Generation. Marketed as a heterosexual movie by Gregg Araki, our director knew how to broaden his audience before surprising everyone by making it the gayest straight film that has ever hit the ether. The queer and homoerotic subtext in this film is so intense that it can't even be called subtext anymore. I think if you're a freak, you should watch The Doom Generation as a first date film, and if they can't handle it, honey, get out of there, 'cause you deserve better. In an interview, Araki recounts how the heterosexual aspect came from a producer who told him he was making gay films that are too punk for gay people, so the notion was, if you make a hetero film, I'll get you a budget, which resulted in the second installment of our beloved trilogy being made on a budget that was close to $1 million, and also providing Araki with a consistent filmmaking crew for the first time in his career. Joined by cinematographer Jim Feely, production designer Therese Dupree, and art director Michael Krantz, who are just a few names to credit for the gorgeous artistry this film holds, the Doom Generation, now restored in its full glory, shines brighter than ever. With this new unrated director's cut, we can finally see the vision Araki has always held for this film. If you have any old VHS tapes or DVDs lying around, burn them, put them in the garbage disposal, send them to the moon, because the director's cut is the only thing Mother Araki wants you to see. Not only does it look and sound absolutely stunning, it also restored some scenes, mainly in its shocking climax. The ending of the film has always been intense, but now even more so. At the start of our voyage, we get introduced to 3 characters by the names of Amy Blue, Jordan White, and Xavier Red, uncoincidentally the 3 colors of the US flag, on a bloody and comedic journey through a nightmarish landscape where everything seems to be costing $6.66 as their journey quickly descends into madness. In the script, Amy gets described as a tiny, raven-haired innocent beneath her heart, clad in god-black image, like a teenage Anna Karina with an asymmetrical A-cut, while Jordan just straight up exudes what the internet likes to call golden retriever energy. Gregg makes a point out of it to describe in the script how beautiful he is, with a face like an angel and infinitely dark eyes that you could just swim in forever. I love how obsessed Gregg Araki is with James Duval. Like, me too, baby.
I was intent on creating, so at this point as an actor, I didn't want to play the same type of character that I did in the first movie. So I wanted my character to be so really marketably different than Andy from Totally Effed Up. I wanted Jordan to be, and he was written to be this sort of like innocent lamb sent to the slaughter, almost too innocent for the world, you know, where everyone had a bad point of view about things. He always saw the good in everything.
He has such golden retriever energy. I don't know if you've ever heard that term.
Oh, yes. Very much puppy dog energy. Very much a puppy
exactly.
dog. Unconditional love.
You just want to protect him.
And it's because he loves unconditionally. He doesn't have these barriers that society and other people have on who you should love and who you can't love, and all those sorts of, you know, this is what you can be and this is what you can't be. And Jordan didn't have any of that. He didn't see that.
I think that's why he's my favorite out of the 3. I know I shouldn't pick favorites, but I think I identified with him the most because I don't identify as a girl or a guy, or I don't care who I fall in love with, and I think that's one of the things he realizes along his journey, that, you know, it doesn't matter as long as there's love, and
that's the most important thing, is love.
Yeah, exactly. The 2 of them have been together for 3 months, which in a teenage time frame is closer to 3 years. Their whole dynamic gets put to the test as the couple meets the sexually liberated drifter Xavier, or simply put, X. The script describes him as intensely sexy with an industrial haircut, his perfect face spattered with crimson blood spangles, and his eyes, electric blue enough normally, juiced up past overload given the circumstances. The eroticism he holds is both appealing and appalling, which isn't easy to pull off. From the first second, the audience gets whisked away to a universe that could have only been created by Araki himself. He wanted the film to feel like a waking dream, and knows how to achieve that with these elaborate set designs, comic book-like violence and dialogue, and a soundtrack that sets the tone for the entire trip. The dialogue in the Doom Generation is really special. It reminds me kind of an R-rated Bill and Ted. It feels like every sentence Amy says could be printed on a t-shirt. Araki said that he kept a notebook with ideas and lines where a lot of Amy's dialogue came from. More than once, we hear Amy say that the world sucks or that life is dumb, which simply captivates what being a teenager is all about. You hate the world and you feel like the entire world is against you. Nihilism is a clear theme throughout this trilogy, especially within the Doom Generation, while simultaneously making fun of it and satirizing it. And Rose McGowan completely steals the show as this foul-mouthed, morally aimless femme fatale. She also has this masculine energy about her, as opposed to James Duval's portrayal of Jordan. He has this boyish puppy charm, again, golden retriever energy. And the way Jonathan Check as Xavier throws these characters into a sexual awakening and allows them to explore the side of their relationship is simply marvelous. At the start, he is an unwelcome third wheel and pulls the couple into a transgressive criminal odyssey against their will. They are more or less virginal, and the insertion of X, quite literally, into this equation gives them the push they need to open up their relationship. Throughout the entire film, it gets hinted that Jordan is more than a little bit queer, and X serves as the catalyst for this exploration. That's why his name is X. He represents the unknown element. I also love how in the script there's this moment where Gregg describes this homoerotic tension, and immediately after that, Jordan belches and says he's got to take a whiz. Romance has left the building, babies. Now, X almost immediately gets on Amy's bad side, and she's a bit at war with herself for still being attracted to him and desiring him. In the words of Araki, the tension between the two of them could start a fire. And opposite that, we have Jordan, who is the more innocent, romantic of the two. He's clearly smitten with this mysterious figure, and it confuses him. His love for Amy is almost childlike, but with X there is this lust and longing that keeps growing within him. The culminating threesome towards the ending of the film proves how inherently this is a story about bisexuality. When Amy leaves the equation, there is this tenderness and intimacy between the two men that suggest what could have been the beginning of something new and honest. Araki is really conscious with what he shows and doesn't show during sex scenes. These scenes are more about experiencing the intimacy between these characters. He lures us in by presenting a triangle of characters that we grow to love and appreciate, and even get fucking annoyed by at moments. Like, will these men ever stop burping? But yeah, even though a lot of these scenes are very erotic, they're also very emotional in the way they get presented. It's not sex for the sake of sex, it's about the connection these people have with each other. We see his characters get to know each other in that earth-sending way, and it's sweaty and messy and also very daring, but also really beautiful. When I was watching Totally Fucked Up, I was like 5 or 10 minutes in, and my Wi-Fi stopped working. And it stopped on like the 1 millisecond of literal porn.
Ah!
So I was just laying there like,
And it's
Good
just
for
it's
them.
such a quick cut. It's such a quick cut too. No pun intended.
It literally stopped on that for 10 minutes, and I was sitting there like watching the
Like,
loading thing on top of it. Like,
oh, we promise that's not what the movie's about, but it does have an image or two like
I
that.
mean, some people would just, but me,
Yeah.
no. I'm like,
Yeah. Or just like screen save.
don't call me out like that. No.
I remember reading Totally Upped Up for the first time and being so kind of blown away by what Gregg had written. You know, and again, I didn't have anything really to base it off of other than I don't know if I'm going to understand how to read a script or if I'm going to get this or I'm going to understand this. And to read it and understand it like I read a book was incredible to me. It spoke to me. Gregg's writing, there's something unique about, and I highly recommend this to all his fans. Like everybody who's a fan of Gregg, read his scripts. His scripts are works of art in themselves. So they'll have a thing like the scene where X in Doom Generation is masturbating, watching us in the tub. And it says he reaches down and it says discreetly off screen because this is a family film after all. And to have that written and like, oh, it is a family film after all.
And
It's
like
just
the
even
Trent
more
Reznor
funny.
mention, like get someone like Trent Reznor to do the soundtrack because we probably can't get him, something along those lines.
Yeah, he's like, or this by this soundtrack, double soundtrack album by like Trent 9 Inch Nails Reznor. Which we were able to get Heresy, so we were happy that we didn't get an original song, but we were able to get Heresy, and that was good enough for us.
And on top of that, Gregg Araki soundtracks are always very interesting little time capsules that set tone for the film. It gives you an idea of what our characters would listen to and what they were feeling like as the story takes place. During the making of the Doom generation, Araki stated he was in his 9-inch nails era, more so than with Totally Fucked Up. The songs of Slow Dive and Jesus and Mary Chain, to name a few, go along perfectly with this image of America in the mid-90s. It's apocalyptic, filled with billboards telling you the end is nigh. Every convenience store is ready for the Armageddon to come, as our trio leaves behind a trail of dismembered bodies and talking heads as a result of their altercations. Disclaimer, there's no actual talking heads on the soundtrack though, because it's not the vibe, but just the way how it starts out so aggressive with the song Heresy by 9-Inch Nails, a song about Trent Reznor's paranoia as a sexually active person during the AIDS epidemic, and the way it ends with the beautiful atmospheric Blue Sky and Clear by Slow Dive is unforgettable. And then the set designs and the costumes, they align perfectly with this aesthetic Araki built for the Doom generation. There's a checkered room that the production designers hand painted that just feels like a crazy, surreal, Lynchian dream. There's a scene that plays out against the backdrop of a faggy Texas roadhouse, plastered in aluminum, where everyone is wearing wigs, and Parker Posey stabs someone in the dick with a katana. The car, the Lincoln Continental the trio drives, feels lived in and lets Amy's personality shine through. There is a dinosaur-themed drive-through. This movie is for autistic people. There's another motel room. By the way, there... Oh my, yeah, I exposed myself just now. There's another motel room that the crew painted completely red. The doomsday messaging plastered throughout the entire trip. The artistry, it just shines through with every single detail, which makes this film such a joy to watch. Almost every instance of violence and gore feels kitsch, and for the lack of a better word, fun. It's very tongue-in-cheek. The bright red color of the blood reminds me of what I love so much about horror films from the 80s. Totally Fucked Up was a brutal film. But Doom is brutal in a total different sense, because Araki establishes a slapstick feel with how comedic he regards these instances of violence and the dialogue and absurdity. The gruesome ending is totally unexpected and catches you extremely off guard. However, our director has said that to him there is a certain foreshadowing of the ending when Jordan is in the bathtub, slips and hits his nose. According to him, you really react to the pain that his body is going through as opposed to heads and arms being blown off. The bathtub scene sets up the ending and the idea that these are just bodies and they can break. Araki always knew the story would end this way because it's something that happened in his hometown. I can't imagine being queer in that era and hearing about something as horrible as this happening in the place where you live. It evokes a strong emotion just reading about this. In Doom, we were along this journey and got to meet the people it happened to, and these images haven't left my head since I saw it, and it still brings me chills whenever I think about it. So before I go into what goes down during the ending, I want to give a trigger warning. It includes sexual assault and mutilation, so for those of you who want to skip that bit or not get spoiled, now is the time. So the final scene all plays out after the threesome against the backdrop of an abandoned warehouse. The fire that illuminates it in the previous scene gets dimmed, enveloping Jordan and X in complete darkness before our entire surroundings get enveloped in strobe lights, revealing 3 stereotypical masculine figures that turn out to be the neo-Nazis our trio encountered before in a record store, where they spat these homophobic remarks towards Jordan and X. They then proceed to rape Amy on top of the American flag before their leader castrates Jordan with pruning shears, violently making his transition into this not a real man status literal. The Doom generation, it's a heterosexual movie in the sense that it shows the toxicity of a heteronormative society. It is about being in America and being queer, being different and an outsider in this culture. and how dangerous this place can be. And those last 6 pages of the script were so hard to read, even though I had already experienced it with my own eyes, because it is still so relevant today. There's a line in the script between parentheses that refers to Jordan and Amy acting like the kids they never truly got the chance to be, which is so heartbreaking to read. Among all the horror and horniness, there's a story about this young couple creating a private romantic utopia despite being surrounded by violence and chaos. Their violence being heavily stylized and unrealistic up until that gruesome ending where you get confronted by the horrors of being queer in a heteronormative society. We start out in a nightclub called Hell and ended in a uniquely American inferno. If Gregg was a poet, The Doom Generation would be his poem. He knows how to incorporate these purely personal details without being too on the nose and drawing you in deeply. It's relatable if you're queer, and maybe not in the literal sense, but that trauma a lot of us go through, Araki visualizes in his own unique way. The ending of The Doom Generation is just like something I have never seen. What was it like reading the screenplay and like getting to the ending? Because I've read the screenplay, and even when I just read it, I already just feel the emotions I felt when I watched it on screen.
Well, I remember when I got to the end of that script, I was like, all right, Gregg, what's the real ending to this script? Because this is crazy. There's no way. And he's like, that's it. And I was just like, wow, okay, wow. This is big. This is a big ending. And so what I was really happy about is we didn't shoot the ending until the end of the movie. So it's like we went through this whole road trip adventure and filmed all that stuff first. So by the time we got to the ending, there was so much emotional connection between us and like this experience and this journey. We'd not only gone through as characters, but as actors.
We survived an earthquake.
Yeah. So, and the earthquake the second day. So it all kind of culminated, I think, really in the end shoot where it was very emotional. And it was a tough shoot. It was a very tough shoot.
I can imagine.
But memorable, unforgettable.
To me, the Doom Generation is just the bi-awakening.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I think Gregg said the biggest compliment is like someone came up to him and was like, Doom Generation made me gay. And like, well, we didn't make you gay. You just kind of realized that you were like, that your window wasn't like this, it was like this.
Like, how can it not when you put the 3 hottest people out there in one car for 90 minutes?
I think for sure is definitely Jonathan and Rose.
Don't sell yourself short like that.
Oh, I'm just happy to be a part of it with them. I'm happy to be the meat in their sandwich.
It's an integral part of a sandwich.
Or at least one of the buns, anyway. But I'm still part of the sandwich. Yeah.
I'm watching that. Like, can I be the dressing?
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. That was the other thing we really loved too. Is like to be able to make a movie that was very sexy, that turned people on, was a big part of it, and that was okay. You're probably like some people are not going to be even aware of the things that turn them on until they watch that. And that's kind of like getting into the root of that. It's just something Gregg's always been really, really good at. Like very, very good at. Well, I remember Rose and Jonathan and I and Gregg were coming from a screening and we were to this party. And as we were going to wait for the elevator, this elevator came down and this couple that was dressed up, like they looked very conservative and they had their ski outfits with pink and blue on or whatever. It's like, oh, we just saw the Doom Generation. We're like, wow. And they're like, yeah, your movie made us want to go back to our hotel room and fuck. And we're like, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Our movie made them want to go back and have sex in their hotel room. So we were all pretty happy about that.
That's your cue for calling your mom and be like, Mom, I made it.
Yeah. It's kind of, I will say when you hear something like that, that's when you're like, okay, I didn't expect that. That's kind of cool. I'm glad I can help, make some people's sex lives better.
I don't need an Oscar. I just need those people to have an orgasm.
That's exactly right. And then, because if they have an orgasm, they're going to be happy. You have an orgasm, you're going to be, everybody has an orgasm. Everybody's happy. It's a much nicer place. No one's repressed anymore.
Gregg Araki, the mother of orgasms.
Yes, maybe not enough people are masturbating, and that's kind of the message. Go out and masturbate, have an orgasm, let some steam out. Everything's going to be okay.
Honestly.
So, but yeah, let's see.
Well,
what
this
else
has
is-
escalated in a way I did not expect.
It's
And I'm here
working,
for it.
working on Gregg's movies is like that. You see, even after all these years, you still never know. And that's the fun of it.
LA is like nowhere. Everybody who lives here is lost.
A film that blurs the lines between gender and takes a postmodernist twist on the 90s, Gregg Araki's Nowhere gets likened to 90210 on acid, and I couldn't describe it any more accurately than that. The plot can be simplified as Araki's take on a teen party movie from the 90s, revolving around a colorful assortment of queer adolescents trying to make sense of their intersecting lives during the fallout of the AIDS epidemic of the 90s. Led by the moody Dark Smith and his bisexual girlfriend Mel, the teens try to make sense of their queerness and relationships while the world around them grows more and more feverish. Nowhere is a roller coaster ride from start to finish, with its iconic opening scene of Araki's muse and leading man James Duval masturbating in the shower as images of his crush Montgomery flash the screen. It's steamy both figuratively and literally, up until the moment Dark gets awakened from his fantasy by his mom walking in the room. With its 82-minute runtime, Nowhere is an experience that washes over you, and if you're not careful, you can get waterboarded by the absurdity. If Nowhere is part of a continuous story, as the name of the teen apocalypse trilogy suggests, we now find ourselves in a post-apocalyptic landscape as we get thrown into the lives of a group of hedonistic teens trying to find enjoyment in the surreal world that's filled with alien abductions, drug trips, and sex. The nightmares and hallucinatory visions of the main character Dark blur the lines between imagination and reality as we experience this intense 24-hour snippets into the lives of him and his peers. With its colorful imagery, the film plays out like a demented game of Twister. There are a lot of characters reaching over and under, touching these different colors. It's very fluid and it's very bisexual. It's a black comedy take on the typical teen rom-coms from the 90s, but goes far beyond the trashy and cheesy charm it exudes. It pays homage to pop art and American pop culture of the era, but it also makes fun of it. There's this hyper-violent scene that includes one of the characters bashing the face in of another with a Campbell's can of tomato soup, framing the can perfectly, with it getting more and more covered in blood or soup every time the character picks it up. On top of that, the dialogue is loaded with slang that Araki is able to pull off by also self-referencing the hell out of itself. When you watch Nowhere, it feels like the film wasn't made in the 90s, it actually feels like you're watching something about the absurdity of this era. It almost seems too 90s for its time. One of the most apparent signs is the consumerism it portrays through its references, but also the ever-present feeling of paranoia and dread looming over these teenagers, tying in with the gay panic. Araki takes his spin on these typical teen movies by never showing any female nudity. Instead, viewers get told to lust over a naked James Duval, most likely confusing cishet man all over the globe. He also makes a caricature out of the only straight couple in the vicinity, which just feels like a breath of fresh air. Gregg really said it's opposite day to day fags, enjoy it while it lasts. The only male-on-male intimacy we see is also not sexual at all. We see Dark kiss Montgomery on his forehead in the most tender way. It's almost like it came out of a period piece in which characters weren't allowed to go any further than that. Dark, he gets portrayed as a hopeless romantic. He's young and alone and desperate for someone to love him. He realizes that, unlike his girlfriend Mel, he's monogamous, causing them to call it quits. Their dynamic is an obvious role reversal of the classic teen romance, with the man wanting all the cliché tropes, and the woman just wanting to have fun. While Mel knows what being bisexual means to her, and how she wants her relationships to look like, Dark is still coming to terms with these strange new feelings. He keeps running into Montgomery in real life, while also being plagued by exciting dreams of him. There's a scene in which Dark records a diary entry, and he says the following.
I swear I've never been so depressed, miserable, and lonely in my entire life. It's like I know there's got to be somebody out there somewhere. Just one person in this huge, horrible, unhappy universe who can hold me in their arms and tell me everything's going to be okay. And how long do I have to wait before that person shows up? I feel like I'm sinking deeper and deeper into quicksand, watching everyone around me die a slow, agonizing death. It's like we all know, way down in our souls, that our generation is going to witness the end of everything. You can see it in our eyes. It's in mine. Look. I'm doomed. I'm only 18 years old and I'm totally doomed.
That monologue shows how Dark's life did a full 180 when he meets Montgomery and gets confronted with that love at first sight chemistry with him. In general, I also felt that his diary entry really represents what being an 18-year-old feels like. A lot of the adolescent experience is about daydreaming and fantasizing and rotting away in your bedroom. A feeling I associate with my teens a lot is that feeling you get in the middle of summer when you know it's beautiful outside, the sun is shining, everyone is having a great time basking in the weather, hanging out with their friends, but you're by yourself in your bedroom, staring at the ceiling, feeling like that's as big as your world is ever gonna get. Feeling trapped within those four walls, knowing there's an entire world happening just outside your door, and it bothers you, but on the other hand, you can't be bothered to get up from your little hellhole of a bedroom because your brain and your body won't let you. Like there's this invisible force trapping you there, making you unable to do anything else than wallow in self-pity and depression. Overall, Dark's character is very refreshing, very relatable, because it shows the opposite of what our heteronormative society expects of bisexuality. I remember a few years ago when I mentioned I was bi to this girl I worked with, she immediately asked me, "Oh, what about your boyfriend? Could you ever be satisfied by only being with him?" And that was the first time I ever got confronted with something like that. It was very shocking to me at the time, but I quickly learned not to give a fuck about what people thought of my sexuality or my gender identity on top of that, because it's none of their business. Something that stands out immediately in Nowhere, just like any other film of this trilogy for that matter, is the set design, especially those of the bedrooms. As teenagers, our bedrooms are the perfect insight into our personalities. I never had a pretty room or a room that felt cozy and homey growing up, but Lord knows my Tumblr used to be full of bedroom inspo. The bedrooms of Nowhere are fantastically unique, with the way Mel's room resembles the game Twister. It's bright and colorful, matching her free-spirited personality. Dark's room is extremely messy, resembling that of a teenager, but then he also has a massive self portrait mural on his wall with more neutral tones and a lot of blue, very intense eyes watching him at every move. Gregg knows exactly what he wants, every costume, every line, every color of nail polish, and talking about murals. The one opposite the bus stop with the sign that says, "God help me," and the religious imagery in general, just reminded me of how some religious groups over in the US try to shove their image of God and religion down gay people's throats. I think people should be able to figure it out for themselves without another human being dictating the rules. Religion is something personal, is it not? It's about how you view the world and morality, and I'm convinced it can bring a great sense of comfort. I just hate how the Catholic Church has abused that power and made it about power and money when it shouldn't be. And the fact that one or two visuals in a Gregg Araki movie can bring that feeling of anger, that social commentary forth, shows how powerful every single detail in his movies are. Nowhere is a form of escape. The characters around Dark all seem to be accepting of their weirdness and queerness, and more than that, they love these aspects about themselves. Every single detail in Nowhere plays out with the attitude of giving zero fucks. It's about breaking free from the barriers and restrictive labels society puts upon us. The teens in Nowhere do not care about the outside. They are the outside and have freed themselves and love themselves and make love whenever and to whomever they want. They are the norm. The end of Nowhere hits you like a bucket of water, or rather blood being thrown in your face. Though Dark's character is the only one to have foreseen his death, stating at the beginning of the film that he feels like he's going to die today, he is the only main character to survive. After sharing an intimate moment with Montgomery, in which they both confess their feelings for one another, Montgomery spontaneously dies. Gregor Samsa has had enough of your faggotry, I guess. For Dark to be a second away from salvation, and then the ending playing out the way it does, we should have known. We saw Montgomery standing next to the bench with the words, "God save me." God can't save you. Montgomery, you're queer. And beside the Kafka reference, there is something so powerful about the look of someone completely covered in blood. Did you ever think at some point, why is my friend always murdering me in his movies? Is this his love language?
Well, I lived in Nowhere. I do live in Nowhere. I did get to live in Nowhere. And
There was the foreshadowing, though, at the beginning.
yes, that something was going to happen. But since Nowhere was going to be the series, I was going to carry the series. That would have been so much fun. But we also realized that, he wanted Nowhere to be, it has, so we were talking about the music. So where the music is Nine Inch Nails and Skinny Puppy and Jesus and Mary Chain Dark for Doom Generation. That's a lot more dancey and upbeat for Nowhere. And the no cussing is, so it was a happier film. My character at least doesn't die in the end. So it definitely has a more upbeat, optimistic feeling to it. It was just something we wanted. And, Gregg was very much, aiming towards, but, and keeping in line with still the everyday struggles of just finding someone to love and be loved with all these outside forces, trying to stop you from that. His Twin Peaks of love, the love story, but Twin Peaks, so to speak.
If Gregg ever made a soap opera a la Twin Peaks.
We wanted Nowhere to be that. That's what he wanted Nowhere to be.
That would be Nowhere, the TV show.
But he did end up doing Now Apocalypse, which is pretty nuts. The box set's coming out in September through Criterion. And that's going to have
exactly. I saw
tons of extras. So we've been working on it with them loosely since last year, and Gregg a lot. And then we filmed some stuff with them a couple months ago, and I gave them access to pretty much everything I've ever had and been given from Gregg. So if I'm not mistaken, which there's more than this, but so there's Nowhere was meant to be a pilot.
Yeah,
it
was going to be
other episodes. I have the next episode of Nowhere. And I think that it's going to be on that box set. You'll be able to read it. What happens the next day, the day after.
Dude, you cannot drop that information on me and expect me to be fine after this.
Yeah, well, Gregg dropped some information on me that I didn't know about. Apparently, he wrote a couple more episodes after that.
You can share everything with me. I will cut it out. Don't worry.
Oh, no, so here's the crazy thing. So I've had this script in my possession, and I haven't shared it. I haven't printed it online. I haven't done anything. I have respect for Gregg and his work. And I've kept it in a box since I got it after we did Nowhere. And he just gave everything that he's ever written to the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, I think you have to go there, though, or there's a way to contact them. They have episodes 3 and 4 of Nowhere. Because I think he wrote 3 or 4, and I only got Nowhere in the second episode. So there's 2 more in there, 1 or 2 more. And I think you can access that's available to the public.
Okay, how do I get to the nearest airport? I finally have a reason to come to America.
You might be able to get a PDF online too, I'm sure.
Okay, I will look into that after this.
Yeah, I'm actually going to do the same because I would like a copy of episodes 3 and 4 because I asked Gregg about it and he's like, "Oh, the Academy has it now from them." I'm like, I haven't looked into it because I've been busy doing other things, but I am going to look into that.
It's the one you have as bonkers and as crazy and as funny as the movie.
It's crazier in some ways. I mean, it's crazy. So one thing that, Greg and I spoke about when we were on the tour for the re-release of the restoration of Nowhere last year was, I don't know if you noticed, but there's no cussing in that film, except for me say Fukine. There's no cursing.
Yeah,
because we wanted it.
I noticed that I don't know if it was existing slang back then, or if he made all that up.
He was kind of making some of it up.
Yeah,
I mean, some of it was, but he was
making it up so he
making a lot
wouldn't
of it
have
up.
to cuss, right?
Yes. And that way we
then
can
it still
be
got
subversive on television. We're not cussing, but we're saying stuff that I don't know if that's acceptable. Which is, again, just the genius of Gregg.
The dialogue in his movies are some of the funniest things you can imagine.
And it's just as wild. I mean, I can tell you that. So you remember at the end of Nowhere, I find like perfect love, everything I've been looking for, just someone to love and love me back. And I could love them. And the perfect love blows up in my face, literally just blows up in my face. And there's the credits. I scream at the end. It fades to black. Then you get to Nowhere episode 2.
Now imagine me under the blankets being like.
And we'll imagine episode 2. Then it starts off Nowhere, the next episode, black screen for about 5 seconds. Then you hear a crash, window breaks. I wake up, Dark wakes up in his bed. Montgomery doesn't look like he was ever there and never blew up.
Dude, no.
He's still a little bloody from the fight, and then recording his video and then passing out. And he goes to get the rock that was thrown through his window, and there's a piece of paper on the rock with the rubber. So he takes the rubber band on the rock, and the piece of paper just says YERDED, you're dead. And then it cuts to Cowboy. Dude. And Cowboy's coming over to my house because he just found Bart dead in the oven, and he's crying. So he comes over to my place. Then we decide we're going to go to the Quickie Mart. I can't remember why, but we go to the Quickie Mart, and there, Lucifer with the purple hair is there with not Montgomery, but his name is Cliff. And he looks like Montgomery, but he has black hair instead of blonde hair, and his blue eye and green eye are switched the other way. And he's like an evil version, like wants to kill me. So him and Lucifer.
Well, the line between murder and making love is thin. So
that's very, very thin. I mean,
for Dark and Cliff to get together.
I wonder. That's why I want to read the 3rd and 4th episodes. I haven't read them yet.
Oh my god, that is freaking awesome.
Yeah. So it's. I think at one point Alyssa becomes a nun. Stops. All she does is, because the thing is I think he was talking about this on the tour too. That when you watch Nowhere, all that Alyssa and Shad do is just all they do is have sex. You can't really show that on television all the time. So we're at least in the 90s. So they kind of disappeared, and Alyssa became a nun.
Where's Annie? Well, she became a nun.
Yeah. So there were some funny ideas there, and also and of course I'll post it. If I get the information on those scripts, I'll post it. But we also did that pilot for MTV that never came out. That this is how the world ends, and I have the episode sequel to that. What happens after Wow World? Because the bus crashes, if you remember.
After the world ends.
Yeah, and then it's crazy.
Holy shit!
Would have been so much fun to shoot. It's just MTV didn't pick up our TV series.
Well, they're gonna receive a very angry email from me. So.
Well, I will say the wonderful thing is they didn't pick up our TV series, but then Gregg gave us Mysterious Skin.
Like the restorations of the Doom Generation and Nowhere, you were able to show it to new audiences again. What was that like, showing it to older fans but also new fans?
That's been incredibly unexpected pleasure to see that maybe more than sometimes half to 3/4 of the audience are new fans, and that a quarter to half is old fans, which makes sense because we would only be a quarter, maybe a half an audience at full back. To see that it has gone across generations and that it's been able to connect with people in a way that it wasn't able to connect with before. I mean, that's beyond our wildest dreams, to be quite honest. We never thought we'd be back showing these movies, much less get to show them the way they were meant to be seen. I mean, Greg and I don't like when people bootleg shirts or bootleg the movies or whatever. We don't, we're not making money off it anyway. So what do we care? We just want people to be able to have an opportunity to watch the movies. But unfortunately, when bootlegging happens, or from what was released, just was not very good, high quality versions of the movies ever. And Greg has always been very intent. Like when you watch the original, 32 millimeter, 24 millimeter film, 32. And when you watch that, you can see how beautiful it was, and it was shot for those colors. And the reason why, for instance, with Jim Feely and Doom Generation, or Arturo with Nowhere, the DPs who worked extensively with Greg to create this look, this kind of hyper accentuated eye candy kind of pop culture and of the sixth dimension kind of look. And to be able to come back, like I said, all these years later and really restore it in a format where you can see it the way Greg always meant for it to be seen is an added extra bonus to that.
Yeah, like seeing these versions, they really fully transform you into the universe that every single one of those films wants to portray. Like Totally Fucked Up has a whole other feeling looming over it than the Doom Generation or Nowhere. Like when I watched Nowhere, mind you, I had seen the first and the second already, so my brain was already like, this is awesome. I don't know what's happening, but this is awesome. That film felt like an ADHD trip in the best way possible.
It's meant to. It's meant to. It's incredible to hear you say it, actually, because I mean that's exactly right. Nowhere's kind of the party movie. Doom Generation's the angry Nine Inch Nails kind of through the world kind of movie, and then Totally Effed Up's also angry, but it's more. I think it's more. It's subtly more reflective and internal. It's more restrained in that.
It feels a little subdued, I think is the word.
Yes, which I like.
Me too. These films were made before I was born. They were made on a continent I've never been to. And that shows how magical the art of cinema can be, in the sense that even with these major differences, they can speak to people all around the globe. That's this universal experience I was talking about at the beginning of this episode, this relatability and pain that queer people get put through. We've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. A lot of us are suffering, some more than others, so it's important to celebrate these stories, even the bloody and the violent ones, because despite the hurt, there is also beauty there. Gregg Araki shows these two sides so masterfully, and he makes them intertwine so naturally because that's what real life is. I just love queer stories, and I love how unapologetic and in your face the films of Gregg Araki are. I'm not just talking about the blood and gore or the violent aspects. I'm mostly talking about the intimacy he portrays in these films. Physical intimacy, sex and sexuality is a part of the lives of a lot of people, and they're a big aspect of Araki's trilogy, and the way he puts it is so important to take with you in these films. And I'm convinced that in our current political climate, we need more films like these. They were needed then, and they are still needed now. Not everything has to be family friendly and wholesome and rainbows, because that's not what life is like. That's not what sexuality and gender are like, and that's not what being queer or trans is all about. I feel like mainstream gay media these days is all about these perfectly polished, family-friendly stories that exist in a utopia that is nice to escape to once in a while, but at a certain point it just becomes too much, and it feels like the reality of our struggles gets put into the background or solved so quickly that it just doesn't seem realistic. And at times like these, I like to go back to my roots. I like going back to the films that were there when the pain of being queer overpowered the joy. It's then when I need the realism and not the escapism. It's then when I'll watch My Own Private Idaho or binge the trilogy, because these stories are not about escaping into your positive bubble, but into the pain. And it's up to you how you go on with said pain. Do you chug the drain cleaner, or do you get back onto the highway and ride off to the rest of your life? The films of the new queer cinema movement and the ones in the trilogy couldn't have gotten their point across by being sweet and innocent. Yes, of course we need shows like Heartstopper or whatever it's called, but it feels like the mainstream cannot handle intimacy between two people that just happen to be queer when it's exactly what it needs. We fuck and we bleed and we dance and we laugh and we sing and we cry and we are here and we have always been here, and no rules, no norms, no stupid streaming service, no president and no government can ever take that away from us. The trilogy resonates a lot with me because of the found family aspect of it. Araki's characters, they feel like a kind of ragtag chosen family. They're on the road together, or on the run from aliens, or an impending apocalypse that's creeping onto the horizon. But at the end of the day, it's all about finding your tribe, finding that glimmer of hope in an inhospitable environment, in a society that has shunned you. By showing that in his films, he gave adolescent queers watching this the hope that his characters were looking for, even though they didn't necessarily find them. James Duval's characters throughout this trilogy never get this happy ending. Andy commits suicide, Jordan gets violently killed by homophobic neo-Nazis, and even though Dark doesn't die himself, he carries this eerie feeling that he'll die young and ultimately ends up covered in blood of the person he thought of as his salvation, his one true love. In Nowhere, we hear Dark say the words, LA's like nowhere, everyone who lives here is lost, which not only captures the feeling of the third installment, but of the underlying feeling in the entire trilogy. The trilogy is Araki's ode to rebellion, nihilism, punk music and the punk mentality, and most importantly, sexual fluidity. There's a strong personal and political conviction in every one of these films. They speak to the outsider spirit and create a society in which heterosexuality isn't the norm for once. Araki is the best at writing endings that not only serve as a gut punch, but they make you think. They never leave you and cause you to question the society you live in, which is a big reason why they appeal to so many people. Because they were made in the 90s, there wasn't a so called gay mainstream like we have now, which makes these works so authentic. Because they were made by actual queer people of that time, people who didn't feel like they belonged in society, who didn't have to worry about appeasing to the norms around them. Up until the Doom generation, Araki paid for these films himself, and even after that, the budgets weren't massive, which shows how much love and devotion Gregg put into these stories. His blood runs through them. He understands teenagers and queer teenagers and knows how to portray them in a nuanced way. He knows how to work this running theme of nihilism into these stories while still holding on to that feeling of love and companionship and sometimes romance these characters found with each other despite it all. I came across the trilogy at like, well, it's like I didn't came across it came on my feed, it felt like, because at that time in my life I was just starting to go to therapy, and I had my first therapy appointment, and I don't know how it's like in America, but here the waiting lists are very long. And I finally had that first appointment, and I got home and I just watched all three of those movies back to back, laying in bed, like tucked into my blanket. It was like October, I think, so it was dark out and it was raining, and it was just very comforting, even though the subject itself might not have always been that comforting. I don't know
That's
if that makes sense, but
it does make sense, and
Mhm.
I've got to say that means more to Greg and to myself and to everybody involved, more than we can ever say. When we were making those movies and when we made those movies, they were so
Mhm.
little and off the radar. So even when they came
Mhm.
out, they weren't big hits at the movie theater. But
Mhm.
we knew we were making movies that weren't just for us. That
Mhm.
it was a sort of, if it wasn't everybody who would watch the movie, but if you were going through something, if you were of a certain sort of character or spirit and you watch that film, it would speak to you. You wouldn't be alone, because at that time when we were making it, we were very much on the outside. That wasn't how. I mean, we couldn't really even talk about that stuff in the open without risk of getting in fights or being beat up. Or it was a very, very crazy conservative time,
Mhm.
and it's been incredible to watch it you know, grow. And in a lot of ways, it's grown with the people that it was meant to grow with. And it's still off the radar of the people that don't
got a
pay
life
attention.
of its own, I feel like.
Yeah, well, you know, I remember I was driving across the United States, and I'm from the West Coast to St. Louis, which is
Mm-hmm.
2-day drive. And I remember maybe about 3 or 4 hours in the middle of nowhere, just past the border of Oklahoma into Missouri. And I stopped at this restaurant at 1:30 in the morning through the drive-through. And I was with my sister, and we ordered some food. You know, we're almost going to be in St. Louis, maybe by 5 or 6 in the morning. And the guy comes to deliver the food, and he looks down. He's like, "Are you James Duval from nowhere?" And all I could think is, at 1:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere, really hundreds of miles from the nearest city. And I said, "Yeah, wow, how do you know?" He's like, "Because I love your movie. It's like that movie. I'm, you know, the only gay kid in my town, and that movie spoke to me in a way and made me feel a little bit less alone because there was nobody, you know, like I was saying at the time, it was very conservative in the United States. You couldn't talk about being queer or different, and you were picked on. And so to hear that, and I went back and I told Gregg this, and Gregg's like, that's who I make the movies for. So if you're having a hard time and you're lying in bed and you're feeling alone and you watch that, it's not. I think you're just seeing that the struggles that these characters have is something you can relate to, and that you feel a little less alone, that you're not, it's just that you're not alone in these struggles, because we all have, you know, especially my generation, we didn't talk about this stuff. You just kind of withered it. And that was horrible. And, you know, fortunately, I got therapy. I was able to get therapy when I was young. It wasn't a big thing for kids my age, but it was something you know, my father did, and I sought out, and that I did. And it helped me a lot to be able to express what I was feeling. And, you know, I can attest all this in a lot of ways. I was just very lucky, and that in the same way that you guys identified with Gregg's work, I identified with Gregg's work when I met him and he sent me the script. And I was just very fortunate, you know, that he gave me direction in the sense of not only did I identify with it, but I could perform with him and express these feelings and emotions that I felt very strongly about.
I think like I was laying awake last night and thinking about that. Like I always try to analyze why these movies mean so much to me at this time in my life. And I do feel like totally fucked up is like that time when you're a teenager and you're like, oh my god, everyone in the world hates me. I'm so depressed, all that stuff, like puberty's happening, and you're like trying to figure out who you are. And then the Doom generation is like, you're on that trip and you're experimenting with it and you're finding who you are. And then hopefully nowhere is like, oh, I'm finally comfortable enough with who I am, time to party.
And that's kind of what it is. I mean, I think that I've never heard it actually spoken as simply eloquent as that, but that's exactly what it is in a lot of ways. I think in the end, it's like watching Gregg's movies is you don't know what you're going to get at the end. And that's the important thing is, you know, when we were doing Nowhere, we were all watching, you know, even to get Kathleen Robertson from Beverly Hills 90210. And, you know, I think for us, it was a big thing. But we were watching a lot of 90210 and Melrose Place at the time. And it was like, the shows just became predictable. It was like after everyone has sex with everyone, and everyone has a drug problem, everyone has an alcoholic problem, everyone gets in an alcoholic crash, and then they recover, and it's like they've all slept with each other now, and they've all had a drug problem and it just kind of rotates, you know. And that's where Gregg was like, you know, it would be really great if like an alien came down and like just started raping and zapping, then that would be great. And, you know, it is. It's because it's so different and weird and refreshing, and it throws you for your loop, and you can't go, oh well, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to, and you count it all off, and there's no fun in that anymore. It's not engaging anymore. But you know, I think you couple that with real issues that people, you know, I want to say people of our age. But I think in our hearts, we're still that age. You know, I'll always be that age in my heart. Those struggles that you go through, those conflicts, and it's like how you find yourself. and find your way out. Again, it's like you can see, and it's your tribe of people, it's your friends, that becomes your family. So you can see in Totally Effed Up, for instance, when Andy goes and finds out he tests positive for HIV, he reaches out to everybody and he can't get a hold of anybody. And when he loses that connection with everyone, that's when he drinks the bleach. And you know, if he would have been able to get through to somebody, he hadn't been isolated, it might have saved his life. So it's this idea of how our friends, our connection really are our lives. And without them, it could be detrimental to our lives. They're important. These people, you know, they're the only ones who understand us. They understand the struggle. They understand what we're going through, what you're going through, and how to make that better. And if not better, at least how to help you feel better for that moment. Again, that you're not alone, that your struggle is not solo, and that they're going to ride that through with you.
I always say that it's so important for queer people to know their history, and I feel like the fact that movies like these get restored and stuff like that, like they're such a big part of queer history.
They really are. You know, what's incredible to me is what people don't even realize, that they don't even realize people like that old jazz singer-songwriter Cole Porter. And a lot of people didn't know that Cole Porter, they were listening to queer singers singing about queer relationships, but they related to it because it was universal. It was about love. It's about that longing. It's about that not being able to realize that love, not have that love be accepted or returned. And who can't relate to that? What's not the most human thing about that?
Recently, like the last 4 or 5 years or something, I've noticed that in queer media, everything has just been so, you know, sugar-coated and made to be positive, and it's all about you know, how do I explain? Like the whole, whenever there's like a gay show, it always has to be either the happy moments or it's about coming out. And that's why I think that those movies we just talked about and the trilogy is so important to queer history, because it shows something so real and something so negative as well. But that's why I think it makes people like me feel so comforted, because it's not all about that sugar-coated good
Right, and that
so
stuff's
like the
good too,
fake
and there's a
positivity
place for
stuff.
it. But yeah, we wanted to normalize it.
Mm-hmm.
We've always wanted to normalize it. We don't want it to be sugar-coated, because it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want it to be, because that's not even the life that we live. That's just not what it's been for us. You know, it has been hard. We have had struggles, all of us, you know, Greg, myself, Nathan Bexton, you know, Rose and Jonathan, and, you know, Gilbert and Lance and Jenny and Susan from Totally Effed Up. And, you know, we've all had our share of struggles, and growing up and moving through this industry, being who we were and who we are. And that just becomes, again, it becomes part of that greater battle. But sometimes you want to create a world where it's like especially when people are doing sugarcoating it, or, you know, only focusing on one moment, and say, you know, we really trying to normalize it, create a world where that's not about any of that stuff anymore. It's about the everyday struggles that you're still going to have on top of those things. And that's
I don't want to minimize anything, of course, because those stories are nice
they
too.
are very important.
They're
Absolutely,
needed
I agree.
too.
They're
They're very important.
If anything, you know, it's like, what's great is that they're embracing this, and they are making, you know, queer themed films and telling queer stories, and this is important. But now it's like it's important to normalize this more than ever because of that. So it's time now that we've gotten to the first step, as we take the next step and the next step, and we continue to evolve and to normalize and tell stories where we can relate, not just as queer people, but everybody. It's like anybody who can watch it could relate to that, like that universal love. And, you know, that's something I think that Gregg's always tried to do with his movies. The through line through all the trilogy, from Andy and Totally Effed Up to Jordan and Doom to, you know, Dark and Nowhere. It's all about just finding someone to love and be loved in return. And that is the most magical thing in the world. And whatever form that takes, who cares? The love, that's what's important. That's what we don't have enough of. That's what we need. And that's what we should be focusing on. And again, I got to credit Gregg for that, because he just, I mean, he's the one who created it. Really, I just played it. But I was able to identify with it because I agree with him, and I think that you as a fan and the fans that we've gotten over the years is very much the same thing. And that's the hope ultimately is, we see all this division and craziness in the world right now. And it certainly existed since I was a kid, as long as I can remember. But the idea of then that is still the big idea now is to knock those barriers down. That's like a cross-generational fight. Like the good fight that we're all trying to do is knock those walls and knock those barriers down so we can just love each other. Because it is a much better place like that. And we're all much happier people. Sometimes we find the people that are fighting us the strongest are the people that feel the same way, but they bury it inside and they feel that they have to carry on acting a certain way or putting this mask on because society says they have to do that. And society's crazy. Maybe it's a thing. It's like these, again, to have labels. It's like we can remove those. We can knock those boundaries down. And it's just going to be, I love you and you love me. And that's all that matters, and it is the most magical thing to attain. There's this old song called Nature Boy. But in the song, he says, the greatest gift you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. And that is the greatest gift. And if anything, what's incredible is all through the ages, from the oldest stories that we can remember, it's always been about two people fighting to love each other in a society, in a place, or in an arena where they're not allowed to love each other for one stupid reason or another. And we're always shown it's ridiculous. It's stupid. How can these people be so ridiculous? Okay, I understand. Like, isn't love the most important thing? Why can't these just two people be together? Why does everyone have to behave that way? And then you grow up and you see it happening around you in the real world. You're like, oh, this is why people keep writing stories and keep, and it does seem to be this universal struggle. But then I think that in this universal fight, the fight for the greater good, we're also fighting for the people who don't. Unfortunately for them, it's that lack of love. It's that lack of connection. They don't have that. They don't know what that is. So they don't know how important that is. Because if they knew, then maybe they wouldn't be that way. How important that is.
I was having a conversation a few months ago with a friend I met through the internet about these movies, and we were talking about like all those things, and we were like, Greg, he's like wait, he's the mother.
Yeah, he is in a lot of ways.
Because in a way, his movies were like very nurturing to us.
Well, I can say it was, even for me as an actor and someone who worked with him, it was very nurturing for me at that age to be working with him with this, this subject content. It was a big inspiration, and it gave me, all of a sudden I found my place. I wasn't lost anymore. I knew, at least for me, even if I was in a world that a lot of it still didn't accept me, at least I knew where I was now, or what I was trying to do, what I was doing, what I was a part of. And I'm very, very thankful to Gregg for that.
I'm glad to hear that. It's like the people in the movie, like you, and the people watching it, we both found the same thing in the same films, and I think that's so awesome. Like, you almost never get that connection with the people that you're watching on the screen, and it's so awesome that you do all that stuff for the fans, because it just gives even more meaning to these movies.
I can't tell you, thank you again, but I've got to give all the credit to Gregg. I'm just happy and very fortunate to be a part of it. But Gregg really,
every single person who worked on those movies deserves credit, and you know it.
well, they do, but I really give a lot. Gregg is he's definitely the captain of our ship.
I do have one last question.
Sure.
My friend wanted to know, I don't know if you're on Letterboxd.
No, but I need to sign up. Everybody keeps telling me to sign up. I got to check that out so I can share some movies.
You can pick your top 4 favorite movies, and she wanted to know what your top 4 would be.
It's tough because it changes.
Yeah, but at this moment.
Oh, at this moment.
What would it be?
Because I haven't actually started writing. I'm like, I have to start writing this down because people ask. There's a movie by Leo Carax called Mauvaise.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite all-time movies, even still now. There's another movie called Mr. Lonely by
I
Harmony
don't know that
Korine.
one.
That's a really great movie. Like, wow, it's such a great movie. I can't believe it. It's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
And like Diego Luna plays a Michael and Jackson impersonator, and Samantha Morton plays Marilyn Monroe impersonator. And they move into this house with a bunch of other impersonators where they accept each other and call their name by the people they're impersonating and
cool.
create this utopia where they can all be the people that they want to be. And then it ends up all kind of falling apart. It's super weird and crazy, but beautiful and sweet, heartbreaking. And, you know, you got a Charlie Chaplin and an Elvis, and it's wild. Raising sheep. It's just so weird. So that's another one that I think is really beautiful. Those are, but I wouldn't, maybe not right now. Then there's another movie, The Lobster by Yorgos Lanthimos. Do you know that? I really like that movie. It was just so weird. It was so original. I like all his movies, actually.
Yeah, me too.
But there's something special about The Lobster. I just didn't expect that. A movie like that. I didn't expect.
By the way.
Yeah, so I didn't expect. So, and then and Diva. Do you know Diva, the French film Diva?
I've heard of it.
By Jean-Jacques Benet.
I know the name.
It's but of course, you know, there's tons of other little indies that are my favorite, but those ones stand up like for different reasons. Mauvais Sang has always been one of my, from the moment I saw it, I just fell in love with that movie.
I really love him. I know him because of Annette, because I'm a massive fan of Sparks, and it just opened a whole world.
Yeah. And there's filmmakers who create something wholly unique that only when they make a movie do you see something like that, like Gregg Araki. Leo Carax is another one of these filmmakers that we were talking about, Harmony Korine, and you know, he's another one. I mean, the list goes on, of course, you know, but those are definitely like in like my top 10 right now.
Okay, we have less than a minute, so I'm just gonna say thank you so fucking much for doing this. I look up to you. I admire you so much. It's been an awesome 7 months. Looking forward to this, and I hope we can get together again, maybe sometime soon for a little Donnie Darko episode.
We definitely will. I would love. Well, let's stay in touch. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much. I hope you have a nice day, nice week, a nice everything.
You too, and we'll be and thank you again, and we'll do another one very soon.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Oh, my love. Bye-bye.